Krill oil product is becoming increasingly popular as a source of omega-3 fatty acids, and it's kind of being hailed as having superior health benefits by manufacturers. Marketing of krill is focusing on claims of faster absorbed and being superior in health benefits to fish oil. Many of the current krill adverts are certainly toting the small, sort of easy to swallow capsules that are offering the consumer a sort of one-a-day solution for heart health. And I guess personally, I've got a few issues with this. I think it may be a little bit misleading for the consumer. So let's have a quick look at our krill. So, as you're probably aware, krill are shrimp-like crustaceans, and they're found mostly in the Antarctic and North Pacific Oceans. And part of the attraction to krill is obviously that they offer an alternative source of omega-3 to that, or to those omega-3 that are derived from fish. Obviously, with the sort of issues with sort of possible overfishing and depleting of fish stocks, we're always looking for a nice sustainable solution. Now, when it comes to the omega-3 content, so EPA and DHA specifically, krill generally provide around 24% in EPA and DHA. One of the unique properties of krill oil is that it's particularly rich in the carotenoid astaxanthin, and it's in there at about 0.2%. Fish oil naturally contains around 30% omega-3, but then when we start looking at concentrated fish oil formulas, and these are produced through molecular distillation, for example, we can get delivery of up to 90, even higher sometimes, omega-3. Fish oil generally have antioxidants added to act as oil stabilizers. So krill oil has its natural antioxidant astaxanthin. Fish oils generally will have antioxidants added to them. It's actually the astaxanthin content of krill that is likely to contribute significantly to its anti-inflammatory actions, and it's possibly responsible for some of the marketing claims that are hailing krill as, I think some of them are actually claiming it to be something like 48% or 48 times better than fish oil. And if you actually look at antioxidant values of foods, these are expressed in something called ORAC, which is oxygen radical absorbance capacity. We see that astaxanthin is particularly has a particularly high number, and it's very high antioxidant capacity, and it makes it an excellent antioxidant for protecting us against free radical damage. So that's one of the sort of really positive components of krill, if you like. So again, the message that krill provides benefits similar to fish oil or better than fish oil has been growing rapidly. However, there are very few actual published studies, especially sort of bioavailability studies that have been conducted on krill. We're seeing an increase in krill studies looking at the sort of anti-inflammatory and the cardiovascular benefits that are derived from supplementation. And there's certainly indication that krill oil, partly through its astaxanthin content, but also as a provider of EPA and DHA, can certainly reduce inflammation and cardiovascular risk factors, including cholesterol and triglycerides. And I think the marketing for krill actually specifically is sort of heavily weighted on its heart health benefits. But when you're actually sort of looking at the benefits of fish oil and looking at the benefits of krill oil, when you look at these sort of studies, if you go into PubMed, any of you, and sort of just pop in those into the sort of Finder tab at the top, you'll find that there's only really a handful of studies really looking at krill, whereas there are thousands upon thousands of studies that support the benefits of fish oil in sort of health and disease. So In addition, obviously, to astaxanthin content, it's actually the form in which the fatty acids in krill are delivered that makes it so effective at raising EPA and DHA. And that's because long-chain fatty acids, so EPA and DHA primarily, are absorbed and carried into the body's cells in the form of phospholipids. And because phospholipids form the structural basis of cell membranes, they generally are more effectively utilized by the body. So here we have our little picture of a happy triglyceride and a happy phospholipid. Triglycerides are generally the form of fatty acids that are found in sort of fish body oils and cod liver oil, for example. So you have your three fatty acids attached to a glycerol backbone. So I'm just going to use the marker here to sort of differentiate what I'm talking about. And we've got our three fatty acids, and only one of these is generally in nature a long-chain fatty acid. So it'll either be EPA or DHA. So your standard fish body oil will comprise about 30% naturally EPA and DHA. In comparison, however, our phospholipid, comprised of two fatty acids, glycerol backbone, and attached by a phosphate and a head group. And the head group can be either choline or inositol or serine, glycerol, and so on. And generally, the majority of phospholipids found in krill oil have a choline head at the top. And as I've said, they incorporate into cell membranes very effectively. So our omega-3 phospholipid containing our EPA or our DHA fits nicely into our cell membranes. And this is part of the sort of marketing and the benefits actually attributed to krill is that they are very effectively incorporated. However, regardless as to whether you're consuming your omega-3s in the form of triglyceride or whether you're taking them in the form of phospholipids in krill, all fats have to be digested before they can be taken up. And when they hit the gut, we have a variety of different lipase enzymes that are released. Lipase breaks up bonds in triglycerides. Phospholipase breaks bonds in phospholipids, and we have our carboxyl lipase, which breaks bonds in ethyl esters. And igenous omega-3s are, or igenous EPA is delivered as an ethyl ester. Once the bonds are broken, we get a blend of monoglycerides, some free fatty acids, and we have lysophosphatides from our phospholipids. So we have a mixture of end products which can then transport through into the enterocyte. But on the other side, these long-chain fatty acids have to be re-esterified back into either a triglyceride, a phospholipid, before they are incorporated into chylomicrons and transported around the body. And here we have a nice tidy diagram to just sort of show you exactly what's going on. So we have our fish, or we have our supplement, we take them in, and I don't know whether you can see in much detail, but here we have our gut lumen, we have our phospholipids, we have our triglycerides, we have our ethyl esters, and they all get broken down, transported into the enterocyte, re-esterified back into triglycerides or phospholipid, packaged into chylomicrons, and then off they go into the lymph, into blood circulation, and then they're distributed throughout the body. So because fatty acids in krill are in phospholipid form, and phospholipids uptake is generally considered to be more efficient than triglyceride, much of the marketing, as I've said, on krill really focuses on this concept that you can actually take less krill oil to get the same benefits as derived from a standard fish body oil. In fact, if you're watching ITV at the moment, you're probably inundated with adverts for mega red krill oil, and there are touting a 300 milligram one-a-day capsule. But if you actually look at how much EPA and DHA you're getting in your 300 milligrams of krill oil, you're getting 36 milligrams of EPA and 16.5 milligrams of DHA. So it's not an awful lot. And I think this is where I guess my personal issues come in here, that if the consumer is being told that 300 milligrams is going to look after their cardiovascular system, then I think it's a little bit misleading. And the basis of this really is centered on the fact that omega-3s in krill oil, in phospholipid form, are so highly bioavailable that you really don't need to take very much. But are the omega-3 fatty acids in krill oil actually more bioavailable than those found in standard fish body oil? And this is where I'm going to lead into to talk about. So this is just a quick table to sort of show you the different compositions of a selection that I found that can be purchased in the UK. So we've got Vitibiotics, we've got Mega Red, Bioglam, we've got Holland and Barrett are doing a good krill. And the and 58 milligrams of DHA. One of the differences between krill oil and standard fish body oil is that the EPA content of krill is actually a little bit higher than found in fish body oil. Okay, so in the last, or since 2009 up until 2013, there are actually only 4 human intervention studies that have specifically gone out to address bioavailability of krill versus fish oil. In the first study in 2009, the group compared 2 grams of krill oil versus 2 grams of fish oil. And within that study, I believe, I'll look at that in a minute, the actual amount of omega-3 in there. The second study compared 3 grams with 1.8 grams of fish oil. These are standard fish body oils, by the way. The third study in 2011, and for me this is a little bit more, giving us a little bit more information. They compared krill oil with concentrated triglycerides and compared them also with ethyl ester. So each supplement regime was delivering a total of 1,680 milligrams, so just over 1.5 grams of EPA and DHA. And the amount of krill that you needed to get this amount was 7 grams compared to 3.4 grams of triglyceride and 3.4 grams of ethyl ester. So you're still having to take twice as much krill to get the same amount of EPA and DHA as delivered by standard concentrated oils. And in our most recent study, we had a like-for-like omega-3 dosing. This study compared 3 grams of fish oil with 3 grams of krill oil and 3 grams of corn oil. Each product, except for the corn oil placebo, of course, delivered 300 milligrams of EPA and DHA. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the first study. So this was a 4-week randomized double-blind study looking at the benefits of krill oil and fish oil, and these were healthy but overweight individuals, so they were slightly overweight, and the group looked at a variety of markers. They looked at changes in serum lipids, they looked at glucose homeostasis, so they looked at glucose levels and insulin response, they looked at various markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. The krill oil group, 2 grams a day, delivering a total amount of 306 milligrams of EPA and DHA. The fish oil group, again, 2 grams of fish oil, delivering slightly more EPA and DHA, so that's 390 milligrams, so slightly more EPA and DHA in the fish oil, and let's have a look and see what happened. Okay, so at the end of the treatment period, the group published mean plasma EPA concentrations that were slightly higher in the krill oil group compared to the fish oil group. So we've got 377 micromoles per litre compared to 293 in the fish oil group. And interestingly, the mean plasma DHA concentrations were pretty similar between the two. And if you remember or as you can see here, the amount of DHA in the krill supplement was actually less than in the fish oil group, but delivered actually a comparable amount plasma concentration. So it's quite positive, really. However, the actual differences, and I think actually the serum lipids isn't supposed to be in there. There were no significant differences in changes in glucose homeostasis. There were no significant differences in any of the markers of inflammation or oxidative stress. But they did find significant increases in baseline in plasma levels of EPA and DHA in both the krill and fish oil group. But there were no significant differences in or changes in serum lipids between the two groups. So although krill oil ended up in a rise in EPA and DHA, or the EPA group was slightly higher in the krill oil, these results weren't actually significant. Sorry, and so the authors sort of summarised their data by suggesting that the EPA and DHA from krill was absorbed at least as well as that from fish oil, but there were sort of comparative amounts of EPA and DHA, but you're not seeing this sort of super high levels that delivered by krill oil that sort of the heavy marketing is really suggesting. Okay, so quickly on to our second study. So here we have a 7-week intervention. We have, in this case, we have healthy individuals. In this study, we have 3 grams a day of krill oil delivering 543 milligrams of EPA and DHA, compared to 1.8 grams of fish oil delivering slightly higher amounts of EPA and DHA, 864. So that's actually just over 60% less omega-3 in the krill oil group than the fish oil group, even though the amount of krill oil used was higher. And the control group received no supplementation. The main findings from this study, again, they looked at markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. They found no significant differences in changes in serum lipids, so no significant changes in between the krill oil and the fish oil group in regards to EPA and DHA. No significant differences in markers of inflammation or oxidative stress between the krill oil and the fish oil group. They did, however, report significant increases in plasma EPA, DPA, and DHA in both the krill oil group and the fish oil group, as you would expect, and not the control, as you would also expect, considering that they received no supplement at all. And again, no significant difference in actual EPA, DPA, and DHA between the krill and the fish oil group. And so the authors, again, they summarised their findings by reporting that krill and fish oil both represent considerable dietary sources of omega-3, even if the EPA and DHA dose in the krill oil was 62%, 62.8 of that delivered in the fish oil group. And so just a quick sort of visual. So these are baseline and after 7 weeks. The blue line represents the change in EPA. Hi, Daryl. Welcome. You'll have access to the webinar, so hopefully you haven't missed too much, but you can catch up later. So, okay, so onwards. So this is EPA blood plasma levels in micromoles per litre, and as you can see, fish oil group containing slightly more EPA than the krill oil group actually resulted in levels that were higher than both the krill oil group and the control. So as you can see, the control, the EPA levels actually dropped slightly. But in this case, in regards to raising EPA levels, the fish oil supplement fared slightly better than the krill oil group, but the results weren't significant. So, again, changes in blood plasma levels, baseline 7 weeks, fish oil and krill, they were almost neck to neck, par on par. So no significant differences. And again, the control group saw a slight decrease in DHA. One interesting aspect of this study, although the sort of outcome of it wasn't particularly significant, was that the krill oil group, or the krill oil supplemented group, actually had a rise in arachidonic acid levels, so omega-6 arachidonic acid. Although this didn't actually impact on the AA to EPA ratio, it was quite interesting that only the krill oil group actually saw a rise in arachidonic acid. So again, sort of more studies are really kind of needed, larger groups, longer periods, to sort of really define what's going on. Okay, and so on to study 3. Now here we have, it's an incorporation of EPA and DHA in response to different omega-3 fatty acid formulations. So this was a study that tested an acute single dose of omega-3s over a period of 48 hours. There were 12 males, and they were randomized into 3 groups, and it was a crossover design. So 7 grams of krill oil delivering just over a gram of EPA and 630 milligrams of DHA. Then we have 3.4 grams of either fish oil as ethyl ester or 3.4 grams of fish oil as triglyceride, and that's actually re-esterified triglyceride, so it's highly concentrated. And on par, all doses or all groups actually delivered relatively similar amounts of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids as EPA and DHA. And I'm not sure if you can see this in great detail, but the outcome of this study was, as we would expect, the triglyceride. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. We have krill oil. Krill oil is a small black dot, as you can see here. And krill oil fared better in raising EPA levels, DHA levels, EPA and DHA, and total omega-3. So we're talking about EPA, DPA, and DHA. So in all cases, krill oil was absorbed more efficiently than triglyceride, then ethyl ester. However, if you look at the arrow bars, none of these results were significantly different. So there was no significant improvement in bioavailability for the krill oil group over either ester or. Okay, so here we have the main findings again. Plasma concentrations were at their highest within 24 hours, and the EPA and DHA were absorbed in the following order. So we have krill oil first, so we have our phospholipid, followed by re-esterified triglyceride, and then finally ethyl ester. And this is actually relatively well known. This is not sort of new news, as it were. But one of the interesting aspects of this study was that the group actually analyzed all the oils, and what they found was that in the krill oil there were very high amounts of EPA and DHA actually as free fatty acids, not incorporated into phospholipid. In fact, 22% of the EPA and 21% of DHA were actually in the form of free fatty acids and not phospholipids. And free fatty acids are actually incredibly bioavailable, so their uptake is incredibly high. However, free fatty acids themselves are very unstable, and this may actually account for the naturally high content of astaxanthin. So if you've got unstable free fatty acids, then you're going to need an antioxidant in there to sort of look after them and prevent them from oxidation. So it kind of answers a few queries there. So it's not necessarily the phospholipid that's responsible for the high bioavailability of krill oil, EPA and DHA in krill oil, but the actual high content of free fatty acids. Anyway, back to the study itself. Again, high standard deviation values, and there were no statistically significant differences in uptake between the three treatments, be them phospholipid, triglyceride, or ethyl ester. And so move on to study 4. This is the final study of the 4 studies. Published last year. This was a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover trial. It was divided into 3 treatment phases. Each oil provided 3 grams. So we've got 3 grams of krill oil, delivering 600 milligrams of omega-3. 3 grams of fish oil, providing 600 milligrams of omega-3, or 3 grams of placebo control, which was in the form of corn oil. Each treatment lasted, and each treatment period was then separated by an 8-week washout phase. So if we have a quick look at the main findings of this study, and on first appearance they actually look really rather promising when it comes to krill. We found that consumption of 3 grams a day of krill for a period of 4 weeks increased plasma and red blood cell concentrations of total omega-3 and EPA, and the sum of EPA and DHA, so it's the combined EPA and DHA. So we've got total omega-3, which is EPA, DPA, and DHA, EPA on its own, and the sum of EPA and DHA, so the omega-3 index, more favorably when compared with both the fish oil group and the corn oil group. They also reported that consumption of 3 grams a day of krill oil for 4 weeks decreased plasma omega-6 fatty acids, with a subsequent decrease in the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is again a sort of favorable outcome when we're looking at sort of health benefits of omega-3 fats. And so the authors went on to then conclude that krill oil was superior to fish oil in increasing omega-3, decreasing omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and improving the omega-3 index. So out of our 4 studies, we actually have one that is implying or showing us that krill oil is actually better than fish oil in increasing omega-3 fatty acids. However, this study has since been sort of pulled up slightly, and if we actually look a little bit deeper at the study, there are several flaws that need to be addressed because they do question the validity of the findings. When you look at the actual fatty acid profiles of the oils used, they actually used a fish oil that wasn't a typical fish oil. Now, the issues that arose from this study were actually published by a separate group who sort of challenged them on this, and the response that they came back with was that because the omega-3 content of the krill oil fell below that of the fish oil group, I'm not sure whether I've got that the right way around. So, sorry, I beg your pardon. Right, so the group, to match the concentration of the omega-3 and the volumes between the krill and the fish group, they diluted the fish oil with corn oil at a ratio of 1.3 to 1. So basically, there was more krill oil. They didn't have quite enough fish oil to deliver the same amount of omega-3, so they topped up the fish oil with corn oil. So 3 grams of fish oil that they actually supplemented with, only 1.7 grams was actually fish oil. the remaining 1.3 grams was actually corn oil. And we all know that corn oil is actually really rich in omega-6 fatty acids. So unsurprisingly, the omega-6 content of the krill oil used in this study was low, whereas the omega-6 content of the fish oil group was really rather high. And fish oil really isn't naturally rich in omega-6. And in fact, linoleic acid was the dominant fatty acid, so it made up 32% of the fish oil group, giving it an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of just over 1. And the omega-3 content of the krill oil actually delivered 17% more omega-3 than the fish oil group. So if you were supplementing krill, you got 778 milligrams of long-chain fatty acids versus 664 milligrams in the fish oil group. So although in things they're reporting equal amounts, 600 versus 600, the krill oil was actually delivering 114 milligrams more. So the outcome of this, and this is published by Nichols this year, was that due to the fatty acid profile being non-representative of typical commercially marketed fish oil, the conclusions presented were actually deemed to not be justified, and in fact they were actually very misleading. And it was quite interesting that two of the authors of the study actually worked for the company that actually provided the krill oil, worked for the krill oil company. So I think they were sort of deemed to slightly bias on the findings. And so this was a little table produced from Nicole showing the actual composition of the omega-3 and the omega-6 within the krill oil group and the fish oil group. And here we have 32% omega-6. And this is what you would normally find within a typical profile for a fish oil. So it's quite a few differences between the two. So in regards to sort of the validity of that study, and in fact they were challenged on their findings quite significantly. If they're only actually delivering 1.7 grams of fish oil, then you would expect the krill oil to produce higher, or to have a higher uptake of EPA and DHA. So back to our 4 studies. So in our first study, 2 grams of krill oil versus 2 grams of fish oil, we found that there was a comparable uptake of EPA and DHA between the 2 groups, but nothing particularly significant for the krill oil group. 3 grams of krill oil versus 1.8. Oh, I've got 2 krill oils in there. I do beg your pardon. That should be fish oil, guys. Comparable uptake of EPA and DHA, but again, no significant differences in omega-3 levels with higher intake of krill. It doesn't support the sort of less is more, the more is less or anything. Our third study, krill versus triglyceride versus ethyl ester, we saw that supplementing with 7 grams of krill oil delivers comparable EPA and DHA, as these are concentrated omega-3 fatty acids. So these aren't standard fish body oils. These are highly concentrated, so triglyceride and ethyl ester. So there was no significant increase in bioavailability in these studies. And then finally, we have our one study that implies that there may be a superior uptake of krill oil, but there was an issue with study bias that brings the results of that into sort of question, really. So currently, based on these 4 studies, and these are the only studies that have been produced looking at bioavailability, it seems to be quite unlikely that if people are trying to sort of sell their krill oil on its bioavailability when comparing it to standard fish oils, it falls a little short. That's not to necessarily say that krill oil doesn't have health benefits. Okay, so although superior bioavailability of omega-3 in krill oil over fish oil is suggested, none of the studies have actually managed to show any significant improvement in absorption of omega-3 fatty acids with krill oil over fish oil. At most, data from a bioavailability study in humans showed a tendency for slightly higher bioavailability for EPA, and that was our third study. And it was because it was only an acute single dose of omega-3 fatty acids over 48 hours. Again, we have to be a little bit careful. So that was just for EPA. None of the other fatty acids were significant. And then our final study has to be kind of interpreted with caution because of the amount of study bias that was reported. So in regards to bioavailability, we know that EPA and DHA in phospholipid form are more bioavailable than EPA and DHA found in fish oil, either as triglyceride or ethyl ester. Many bioavailability studies have shown us that phospholipid is more bioavailable. And in fact, if you look at EPA and DHA absorption, it's generally krill oil, triglyceride, and then ethyl ester. And this is kind of a bit of a given, given that krill oil is in phospholipids. So there is a trend for phospholipid uptake to be superior to both triglyceride and ethyl ester. But in regards to the amount of krill oil versus the amount of fish oil in these studies, there's no significant differences. And it's certainly not on par with the kind of figures that we see in sort of marketing materials for krill. Just a quick note on ethyl ester bioavailability. Obviously, iGenus, our supplements are in ethyl ester form, and there is plenty of evidence that shows that if you take your ethyl ester alongside other dietary fats, so if you take it with a meal, it will provide the glycerol backbone that is required on re-esterification. So don't take ethyl ester on an empty stomach. Simply take it with food, and your bioavailability will be that of a triglyceride or re-esterified triglyceride. Another sort of thing that really kind of needs to be sort of talked about just very briefly is the EPA and DHA ratio. For anybody who sort of attends our webinars and who knows our products, you probably know that we are specifically interested in EPA. Raising EPA levels is incredibly beneficial for decreasing the AA to EPA ratio, which is associated with decreased inflammation. Now, we go for the most favorable EPA to DHA ratio. Again, some studies have shown that DHA within a supplement can actually impede on EPA's benefits. EPA and DHA both get incorporated into triglyceride. Sometimes DHA incorporation can be at the expense of EPA. So sometimes if you have DHA in your supplement, it can actually block the uptake of EPA into triglyceride. And if we're looking at the benefits of EPA specifically, which is now being increasingly recognized as a good standalone omega-3 supplement, then we really do need to address the sort of EPA and DHA ratio here. We know that krill oil delivers around about 123 milligrams of EPA per gram, but it will always deliver both EPA and DHA. We also know that it's generally accepted that highly concentrated omega-3 oils are required to deliver therapeutic outcomes. So we're looking at 1 gram of EPA is required for treating depression, 2 grams for schizophrenia, and if we're looking at sort of cardiovascular risk factors, up to 4 grams a day to reduce very high levels. So at the moment, there just aren't enough studies looking at the benefits of krill. There are more studies coming out, but there still aren't enough studies to really kind of support swapping from krill really to a sort of more concentrated therapeutic supplement. Also, krill oil raises EPA and DHA levels to that of fish oil, but you would actually need very high volumes of krill oil to achieve the actual therapeutic levels of omega-3 that can be delivered quite simply by oils that are containing 70 to 90% omega-3. So again, unless there are more studies published on sort of dosing with krill, it's very difficult to sort of really truly support the use of krill sort of in therapeutics. So just a quick summary. Currently, at the moment, there's actually very little evidence to support some of the bioavailability claims that are related to krill and to support the marketing, I think, that is behind krill. Many of the health benefits that are attributed to krill are probably due to its very high antioxidant content, not just the omega-3 content. And I guess given the cost of krill, some of the supplements can be incredibly expensive. Given the cost of krill when compared to standard fish oils and even sort of more concentrated fish oils as well, I don't think krill oil at the moment currently offers a cost-effective substitute for highly concentrated omega-3 products. And so to end this, we really need to sort of highlight the need for more human intervention studies are required to investigate the effects of krill oil before it can really sort of be marketed in the way it is, I guess. So that's the end of my webinar. I hope you found it beneficial. And we'll probably have a webinar at some point looking a little bit more detail on krill and the benefits of krill. But for the moment, I'm really concentrating on sort of the bioavailability issues. And these are my contact details. If you want to ask me any questions on anything that I've spoken about, or if you want access to any of the papers so that you can read them a little bit more detail yourself, then drop me a line and we can forward those to you. If you want any information on any of our products or any of the science behind our products, again, you can contact us directly. And there will be open access to this webinar in the near future. So in the next couple of days, we'll put it up on our shared webinar page. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time again. I hope you didn't miss out too much there, Daryl. You got the gist of it. So I'm just going to wait around just for a minute in case anybody has any questions. Excellent. Okay, super. Right, the 3rd of March. I don't think it is the 3rd of March. Sorry, Daryl. We will meet, but I don't think we're going to meet in March. I think, thank you, Sophie. Hello, Sophie. Right, okay, that's cleared that up. Then, yes, I'd be delighted to see you, Daryl. It'd be a pleasure to meet you. So, okay, so anybody got any questions, please do contact me directly. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. And for details on that, you can have a look on our website. Okay, thank you very much and good evening.